Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. Justin Watson, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Hi, thanks for having me, JR. I am Justin Watson. I write for Bane Books and some other folks in the short fiction category. So far, I write alt history, military science fiction, a little bit of fantasy so far, and largely in the speculative genre. I'm an Army veteran, former field artillery officer, so anything, just play it loud, okay? And that is me in a few seconds. I'm sure we'll have more fun time to talk about the details.
So fun fact, the J in JR stands for Justin, but I always thought it sounded like a butler's name, and they used to tease me about that in school. So when I was I think I was 5, one of my friends' mom got married. So she changed her last name, and I proudly went up because I'm like, wait, you can change your name? So I proudly marched up to my mom in my 5-year-old little kindergarten voice, and I'm like, Mom, I'm changing my name. And she said, like, hell you are. I gave that name to you, like only a mom can. And that's why I went with my initials JR because I hated Justin because I always thought it sounded like a butler's name.
What's so funny is for me, it's almost the exact opposite. So I'm Justin to everyone who calls me by my first name, which is, most of my civilian friends, and then my veteran friends all call me Watson. But to my mom and my best friend from high school, and only those two people, I'm JT. They called me JT for some reason. No one else picked up on the abbreviation but them.
Okay, that's cool. I mean, I figure if the J and the R were good enough for Tolkien, it's good enough for me. Although I need an extra R, I guess, to be cool.
Want to take the extra one? I don't know, though. Somebody else sat on the extra R, and I don't know if you want to mimic him too closely.
I mean, I finished series, so I'm already a step ahead. All right. So the next part of the introduction, dear listeners, how we first found them, and as we've mentioned in other episodes, we have this partnership we're doing now with Bane, where we're spotlighting some of their authors, and in return they're pimping us out like a rented mule on payday. There are other acronyms and descriptions we could use for, well, we're family friendly, so we'll move on. So since we started this talking about your Army pedigree, we'll jump to those questions first, and then we'll do the religion questions because they're kind of required for this podcast. But do you feel like your time, like we spent an hour in the pre-show where we're supposed to be recording just BSing about our time and overlapped in Iraq? But
isn't it funny how that happens when you get Veterans Day? They can't help but bullshit for an hour about the time they were in. Yeah. So
when you were at West Point, I was already enlisted, and I remember when I got my basic skills manual, it had in there, a good soldier will sleep when and where they can because you don't know when you'll be able to sleep again, preparing you for life in the field. Unfortunately, Shammers and the E4 Mafia weaponized that, so the Army took it out of the edition that came out after I got my copy of that manual, because anybody that got caught sleeping on the, in the wherever they were hiding themselves, pulled their soldier skills book out and were like, au contraire, sergeant. But yeah, so I it's just one of those things, smoking and joking. It's what we do. But do you feel like your time in the Army affects the way you tell stories?
Oh God, yes. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the themes that runs throughout most of the things I've written so far, and I'm pretty early in my career. I only have a couple collaborative novels and some short stories, but one repetitive theme is kind of what we've been talking about, which is, while I don't write comedies per se, most of the books I write are pretty heavy. I mean, the series we're going to talk about today is about the Russian Revolution and Civil War, so not light and airy. But my experience in the Army is that it is hilarious being in the military. Like, it is just a hilarious, absurd experience. And it's a bunch of amazing people, some of them of questionable moral character, some extremely questionable judgment, all put together in a pressure cooker, serving under a bureaucracy that doesn't make a ton of sense a lot of the time. And the results are often hysterical. And one of the things I'm kind of always trying to do in the background of any story I write is give folks, if you've served, let you remember that, give you moments where you can remember that and like, oh yeah, that was, Snuffy was freaking hysterical, whenever we were stuck in the guard tower together, or whenever it was command maintenance and we had him convinced that he needed to put a bag over the exhaust pipe to collect the exhaust sample, or whatever.
Every unit has one of those.
Yeah, every unit has one of those. I had like 5, but to capture those moments for veterans and to communicate that to folks who maybe what they've seen is the super high drama military stuff. You know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of military movies where they're not bad movies, but they just treat everything so terribly seriously, and you're like, well, that's not how I remember it. I remember there were quite a few times where the stakes were not that high. So yeah, that experience I think affected me a lot. I am a combat veteran, so yeah.
This is if you want to explain the Army. You take sandbags that you fill up, load onto the back of the 18-wheeler or flatbed. They take them, load it off the flatbed to someone else to empty them so you could do the circle. That is the easiest way in an image to explain the Army.
I saw this exact image as a punishment detail once. 3 guys had really pissed off the sergeant major. And they actually were doing that.
Wow. I mean, you got a mess. I mean, I've literally peeled potatoes and burned shit. So I mean,
we all, even I took a de facto turn to prove I wasn't too highfalutin to burn shit in a 55-gallon drum.
So the potato burning or peeling thing. So when I went to Fort Benning, it was all male. We jokingly called it the John Wayne School for Wayward Children, or Wayward Boys, I guess. Now, so like I went through, and they didn't teach you really about fraternization except for enlisted and officers, because if you were fraternizing in that way with your trainees, they had other words for it, and this was still don't ask, don't tell, right?
Yeah.
So I got to AIT for my second MOS, and there were girls there, and that were my peers. They were privates just like me, and so when stuff happened and we got in trouble, we both had the privilege of paying for each other's company. So we were both pimps and pimpettes. I don't know how that works, but I mean, I paid for the privilege of having taken her on a date, and she paid the Army the privilege too. And so they ended up giving us mess detail as a punishment as part of this, right? Because we got restricted to base for a month, which when you're in AIT, like you weren't really going anywhere anyway. And so she made the mistake of getting sassy with the mess cook. There was a E7 that ran the mess hall. And she was like, what are you going to do? Make us peel potatoes? And I'm like, oh my God, you didn't shut up, Wendy. But she didn't shut up. She kept going because she was sassy and she was from Brooklyn, and that's just what they do. And long story short, they bought every in the surrounding area potato that was available, and we peeled them by hand. If you don't know, dear listener, they have machines that use centrifugal force and knives to peel potatoes en masse when they go to institutionalized cooking, when they cook to scale. We did not have to peel them by hand, except she wouldn't shut up.
This sounds like something out of a Pauly Shore movie.
Yeah, I mean, the Pauly Shore is pretty accurate to some of the people I served with. Like, was that our truck, drill sergeant?
In the Army now.
Yeah, or the line when he's a prisoner of war, and I think it was Jordan in the movie.
It was Chad.
Chad, yeah. And he's like, oh, they're gonna do the bad guys telling these soldiers they're gonna do this tomorrow. I'm like, oh, they're sussing out like they think they've got a spy. Spoiler alert, by the way, it's like a 30-year-old movie, people. But he goes, no, I watch your CNN. I'm like, that's actually kind of true.
Yep.
But yeah, so I've done that, and then the flip side is, you've seen some of the shenanigans where just none of it makes sense, but you do it anyway because it's what you do, and including burning fecal matter before we had the infrastructure built in the early war in Iraq.
Yep.
And unfortunately, if you're the newest sergeant and they don't necessarily like you, you're going to do a lot of supervisory of the lowest common denominator. I've talked about this on the podcast, but I made corporal 3 times. The 3rd time I messed up so bad they promoted me. And all of them, there's going to be a theme to the pre-show, but I would go out and celebrate with some beverages of adult nature. They don't tend to like that when you get stupid in the barracks. So corporal stripes on, corporal stripes off. But when you're good at your job and you stay in that position, that it kind of inevitably comes back. Although in the modern Army, I can't imagine anybody like those are old Army stories that wouldn't happen anymore, I don't think.
I have no idea. I talk to my friends. It's definitely, from what I hear from my friends who are still in it, is definitely different. There's a different tenor. Because I had those guys.
When I was in Iraq the second time, one of the sergeants that we work with, he was one of the platoon sergeants, and he was one of those go to war, go to jail kinds. He got told that he could take the fighting charge. It was a small, like this was after you can't technically tell them to go to war or go to jail, but in small town judges, it still happens. I mean, it still happens to this day. I know people that are in my family that were like, hey, we'll make this, reckless driving ticket go away. Just go enlist in the military and grow up. And it happens today. Not officially. It's one of those wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But like this
if
dude
they're
was
sending them to us for reckless driving, that's one thing. As long as they're not, sending us freaking hardened felons that we then have to worry about, committing a freaking war crime.
I mean, it's just for fighting. I mean, like you can channel that rage into something.
Yeah, my guys, I had guys who would regularly get into fisticuffs with the Turkish population of bombholder Germany, and they'd get in trouble for it. But was I that upset? It's like, yeah, I mean they're soldiers.
But it's also like it's weird because I remember our first sergeant when we went on leave was like, if everybody comes back and they got in a bar fight and they look like their ass was handed to them sideways, and you're the only one that comes back without bruises, you better be Jackie frickin' Chan. Otherwise, you're the douchebag who didn't defend his people. So it's kind of like a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B on that one, because you also want that unit cohesion, and nothing but can breed that like a bar fight on occasion. I'm not endorsing this, by the way, people.
Yeah, no.
Violence only sometimes solves your problems, but not all the time.
I mean, I will say, I don't think we were being Blue Falcons, but we did have one friend in Germany who insisted on getting his ass beat by the Polizei by provoking the German police, over and over again. And when we tried to get him to stop.
So I had a E4 that worked for me when I was, so the gun truck team I led was actually 3 gun trucks, not 3 people. So my fire team was squad size just because they were making it up as we went. I had 9 guys that worked for me over the course of any given time, which was the normal infantry unit. That's a squad.
Yeah.
But I'm doing that as a team leader because it was the trucks, not the people. But this guy was from, we're going to call him Whitey. That's not his name because I protect it. But he was from Boston, a little short dude, Napoleon complex. And we're leaving the PX out of BIOP, and they've got this like cattle moo run thing that you're supposed to zigzag around and in, so that way you don't have like it's an anti-ambush thing, right? But for security,
it's so a vehicle can't build up speed,
right?
The gate, yeah. And
we're walking through this, and he bumps into these like dudes that are like mountains of men that are from the Navy SEAL team that was in BIOP. They had taken over Uday's palace. It was one of Saddam's sons. And he bumps into them, and they're like, "Oh, dude, sorry." Like they're really chill. Like they're just gonna let it go, and he just keeps going and going and going. So of course there was a fight because he wouldn't let it go, and of course once he gets in the fight, you have to get in the fight because you can't not. So there was like 6 of us there at the time because 2 of them had the other one of them was guarding our trucks, and the other 2 had broken arms because we had gotten blown up, so they were not fit to fight. So I'm like, dudes, you just watch the rifles. The rest of us will, embarrass ourselves. And so we outnumbered them 2-1. So of course the Navy SEALs kicked our butts. They're also a lot bigger than us. In my defense, I played rugby, so I did give some bloody noses and I one black eye. I will take the win. But the MPs show up because they're like, oh my God, these guys are fighting. And thinking on my feet, I was able to do the anti-Blue Falcon. I'm like, oh, they were teaching us hand-to-hand combat. This was a little off-the-books training. And I mean, what are they going to say to that? Like, don't train? So they let us go.
Like the MPs want to fill out the paperwork either. So if y'all are all
not,
story.
But the SEALs were pretty cool about it. So they invited us back to their base, and man, they eat well. Like I don't remember any of that in the DFAC. And we got to hang out with them anytime we were passing through, except for Whitey. They made him wait in the car.
Nice.
They actually souped up some of our equipment because they have access to cooler stuff than we do. Including engines that are designed for the heat and the weight of an armored vehicle, where ours was not.
You mean the 1114 didn't always run for you like it was supposed to?
Funny how that works when you add a ton of armor to it.
Yeah.
And so I was there when they did the famous, was it Rumsfeld that did the Army we have, not the Army we want?
Army we have, not the Army we want, yeah.
And so I actually liberated a few 55 gallon drums that had been turned into grills, and I liberated them from some mechanic units that thank you people, and we welded those onto our truck for armor in the beginning. Like we didn't even have the up armored kits yet. We had what they called the we'll call it hillbilly armor because the other one's not politically correct anymore.
Yeah, I gotcha. By the time I got there in early 06, and we had the first generation of, I think it was the 1114, the first generation of actually up armored Humvee. But like you said, like
The engine still could take the heat.
Yeah, they were prone to breaking down pretty frequently. I'm actually, I won't go into full gory details, but I'm actually only still here because the air conditioning system was notoriously unreliable. And in the Humvee, I was riding in a Humvee with my company commander. I was in the back, and the air conditioning worked behind the driver. The vent behind the driver worked, but not behind the TC. So I got on the side where the air conditioning worked, and I survived the resulting IED blast because of where I was sitting. So that shitty 1114 maybe kind of saved my life in a way.
I mean, I feel the same way. I got shot in the chest twice, but the Stabby plate took it.
Yeah.
So
you still have them? Do you still have them?
No, they made me turn them into supply.
Sorry. I have mine from the IED still.
Well, you were an officer. I was a sergeant. I didn't have that kind of pull.
Oh, okay.
They have the juice, you know?
They shipped him home with me and never asked for him back. It's not like I made a stink.
Well, the cool thing is the guy that treated me when I went to the aid station, because when I got shot in the chest, I also dislocated my shoulder. So we went to the aid station out of BIOP because we passed through there when we were doing the Sunni Triangle routes to resupply the Marines. And this is when Fallujah was in full swing. And I remember the medic who's I'm friends with now. He lives like 5 blocks away from me. We didn't plan that. I'm going there to get my shoulder set, and Whitey was a paramedic on the outside, and we're calling him that, people. That's not his name because I got to protect his family. And he's like, "Oh, just slam it into the door. That's how we do it on the paramedics." And I believed him.
Lethal Weapon?
Right? I hadn't seen Lethal Weapon yet, all right? And I did it, and it hurt, and it didn't work. And so I went there like I'm not crying, but there are tears coming out of my eyes because like this hurts. And I'm going to the medic to get them to set it because Whitey wouldn't do it for me because he was a jerk. He also had the Boston accent, so I'd make him do the park your car at the Harvard Yard. I'm a park my car at the Harvard Yard. We made him say that a lot. I probably had it coming, if we're being honest. And so I remember this medic was like, "Dang, Handley, you've got sand in your," and then he used the V word for lady parts and reamed me the whole time he was setting it for being such a wimp. Only in the infantry would we treat people like that, laughing at my pain.
So I had the classic. Doc runs up to me. I've been blown up, leg broken, arm broken, and I'm, you're so hyped up on adrenaline. I'm not really feeling the pain yet,
Oh, but it comes.
It comes, but he gets me. I had managed to like jimmy back up to like I had an M16. I'm old enough. I still had an M16A2.
My unit deployed with A1s. We got the A2s in combat in country.
Yeah. So yeah, M16A2 was my rifle. It had the buttstock had been snapped off, so I just had basically the upper receiver in my left hand. And I was kind of propping myself up on that in the crater. And they saw me and they ran over and they sent me to Doc's like, "Lie down, sir. You're gonna hurt yourself. Come to lie down, all right." And I look down and I cannot see below my midsection. I'm covered in junk, blood, guts, etc. And my eyes go wide as saucers. I'm scared. I'm scared. The adrenaline's starting to wear off. It's starting to hurt, and I'm starting to worry about what's going on down there. And Doc looks at me.
All dudes, you ask about your junk first.
So Doc looks down. My right leg is pretty badly mangled. So he just like, "Don't worry, your leg's broken. It's just broken. We're not going to have you amputate." And I say, "Doc, fuck, my leg is still attached."
Yes.
And he does a quick peek and he's like, "You're good, sir." And I'm like, all right, Doc, save my life. Go ahead. And he did. Great guy. I still talk to him from time to time. Him and some of the infantry guys that were there. Freaking 19 years old, professional, cool as a cucumber, absolute fucking American hero. Saved my life, got me home.
When we were in BIOP for my second tour, there was a Connex yard there. It was a staging ground for a lot of stuff that went north, and we were doing the Missoula run at this point. They had an issue with some of the drivers, the civilian drivers, trying to take off with the cargo to sell it to the insurgents. So we had to like stage them in such a way that with the convoys we were escorting, that they couldn't run off with the gear. And so I'm at the back. I'm about, 75 meters from this porta potty. I get there in the porta potty, and there is no toilet paper, and I forgot mine. So I'm leaving the porta potty, going back to rectify that. MREs are not your friend, people. And so I'm literally like a couple meters from this porta potty, and a mortar lands on it from one of the insurgents bombing it out of the base, and so blue goo is everywhere. It's nasty. It's gross. If I had not forgotten my toilet paper, I would not be here today because I'd have been sitting in that porta potty. And I remember looking like after the shock wears off, and all I could think of was, man, that'd have been a shitty way to go. And I keep thinking in the movies, right? You have way cooler one-liners. And now if the one-liner is too cool, I'm like, clearly that person's never been in danger because you're not thinking like that in the moment.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, like you're fucking no. Like there's nothing smooth about that.
Nothing. So all right, so
I'm just glad mine was funny.
Absolutely. Like there's like you mess with each other. I remember we were there though, and we thought it was hilarious. We had cots that we stayed because we had to guard the civilians, so we just slept on cots the entire year outside of our trucks. And the mortar started coming in one of the times we were there, and the new guys are all freaking out, like, we got to get to the bunker. And I remember rolling over. I'm like, yeah, wake me when they're 25 meters closer. And I went back to bed.
If you're gonna go, you're gonna go.
That's you do kind of get fatalistic about that.
True story. One of the other soldiers who helped get me into the medevac bird, not the medic, but one of the infantry guys, I ran into him 5 years later, about 5 years later on my Afghanistan tour. And he's counting piece on a detail at the mess facility, the DFAC in Afghanistan, and he's counting people in, and he sees me, and he's like, "Hey, sir, good to see you. How's everything running? Everything still attached?" Like first thing he says to me, and I'm like, "Hey, Stuffy, what's going on? It's good to see you." Yep.
It's weird though, because like the most surreal experience was when we got in a firefight because this VBED tried to ram our position, and we were doing an overwatch for a cordon and search, and he's trying to break through to let whatever. We don't always get the details, so like I don't even know what they were looking for in the cordon or in the search. Like we were the cordon, we were the blocking. And so they didn't tell us. They're like, just show up here, point your guns, and like don't let anything through. And the weirdest feeling was we just got in a firefight with this dude because he tried to ram our position, and when that didn't work, like he couldn't get the IED to go off inside his vehicle. So he's pulling out his AK and he's like, just unloosing on us. And so of course we shoot back, and he's wounded now. And the weirdest sensation was realizing we had to call a medevac for the guy that just tried to kill us.
Yep.
Because we couldn't just let him die. Rules of war say, nope, got to give him medical aid. I'm like, what about just this one time? Because I'm not real happy with this guy right now.
Yeah. Well, it's like you saw I don't know if the video is on YouTube, but I know there's a video going around, like a medic takes a 7.62 right to the plate, gets up, shoots the guy, then saves his life after he shoots him. Same guy.
I've seen that.
Yeah, like same medic takes a shot to the chest with his sappy plates on, then gets back up, shoots the guy down, then patches his bullet holes and saves his life.
Yeah, the military's weird like that. Like there was when you're at FOBs, like the battle rattle all the time. So if you leave your tent, you've got to have your Kevlar, your rifle, your web gear, whatever, flak jacket, whatever you're issued at the time, because that kind of evolved over the course of the war. And I remember at one of the training FOBs before we deployed for our second time, we were doing desert warfare training in New Jersey at Fort Dix in the winter. And so we're rolling around doing training in the snow. It's like, knee deep.
Germany in the winter. Same thing.
That's the government logic for you.
Yeah.
This dude had to go to the bathroom so bad he just runs out, and he's literally wearing nothing but his battle rattle. No clothes, no underwear, no nothing. And I was thinking only in the Army would we laugh about that. His nickname after that was Ice Cube, and his answer was always, "He was cold, okay, people?"
That's fantastic.
But yeah, it's just one of those things. And that every time I think of that, I remember there was that one in Afghanistan where the guy's literally running out in his pink boxers. Do you remember that? It was on the Time magazine or something. He's
fighting with his plate carrier and a 249.
Yeah, and it was like I was New York or something. It was just it was hilarious. Like, they captured that and everyone was like, "Oh, that had to be staged." I'm like, "No, I can guarantee that happened 100 times before they got the picture."
So one of my buddies, we're in Kuwait getting ready for second deployment, I think. So we're in Kuwait staging to go into Iraq, and this is 2008, I want to say. So my second Iraq tour. And one of my buddies had his sleeves cuffed, right? Had the sleeves undone on his ACU, the worst Army uniform.
Grandma's couch disagrees.
Yeah, well, if we're ever invading a gravel pit like New Jersey, it might be useful. But in any event, he's got his sleeves just loosened a little bit to let airflow go through, and the sergeant major detonates this lieutenant for having his sleeves open because that's not SOP. The uniform SOP or no, I'm sorry, it wasn't that. It wasn't the sleeves that time. It was that he wasn't wearing his gloves. That's what it was. He wasn't wearing his gloves, and the SOP required tactical gloves, which you should be wearing gloves a lot of the time to avoid burning your hands when you're handling metal, right? But he's writing on a clipboard. He's not going to burn his hands. He's not handling ammunition or metal, regardless. So my friend looks at the SOP, the SOP, and what's listed in the tactical uniform for the SOP, and it has, your vest and your plates and your helmet and your socks and your boots and your gloves, your underwear, and it doesn't say a damn thing about the ACU. Does not say a thing about your fatigue jacket, does not say a thing about your ACU pants.
I'm sensing some malicious compliance coming our way.
So he's out there walking up and down. We're a paladin unit, so think of if you're not familiar with a self-propelled, I know you are, JR, you know what I'm talking about, but dear viewer, if you're not familiar with a self-propelled howitzer, it looks like a tank with hydrocephalus, like, the turret, they look oversized because they are. And so he's walking around the gun line while the guns are firing, like walking behind them in his underwear and a plate carrier and boots and gloves and his helmet and his sunglasses.
That's the kind of officer you follow to hell just because you like them.
He was a good dude.
So I tell you what, if people aren't familiar with the Paladin and the kind of equipment you have, I know you just started your newsletter. This will air in June. So if they sign up after listening to this in your July newsletter, can you show some pictures of some of that artillery? Absolutely. So
I do not have a picture of my friend in his underwear and SOP uniform, so I can't show you that, but I can show you. I can talk about the Paladin.
All right, perfect. So if you're interested, dear listener, he'll tell you that story in his July newsletter when you sign up, and the link will be to his website, and it's very prominent. Sign up for my newsletter; really easy to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, but yeah, the military had a lot of those funny moments. Some of them family friendly, some of them not so much. But it was, some of the best weirdos I've ever met. And if you think that stereotype doesn't exist in your unit, it was probably you.
Yeah. So there was a quote I read at West Point. Yeah. So I did go to West Point. But in the library, I found a book called The Last Centurions. I can't remember the name of the author. He's a French guy who fought in the French Indochina War. So, Vietnam Part 1, France versus Vietnam. And he, one of his characters, it's a historical novel. It's not actually a history book. And one of his characters says, the army is filled with thieves and drunkards and philanderers and fools. And he says, well, why are you here? And he says, it's also the only place you make true friends.
Yeah,
and it's like,
it's that old expression, you go to heaven for the weather and hell for the company.
Yeah.
It's weird. But like I said, you take away all the artifice of modern society, and what you're left with is, in essence, your true self. So yeah, it kind of makes sense to me that would work. And the other truism in the military, since you mentioned thievery, is there's only one thief in the army. Everyone else is just trying to get their stuff back.
It's true. Talking about what you just pointed out, JR, I think that's really an important thing. Young person considering joining the army, like, oh, I don't want to give up my individuality. Dude, wearing a uniform brings out your individuality in ways you could never imagine. Like, it does not make you, like, yes, you become a unit. Yes, you become part of a greater whole, but you learn who you are in a way that, a piercing or a tattoo, or not that you're not going to end up with tattoos if you want them in the military, in ways that none of that can. So, yeah, no, definitely agree with that.
Yeah. So we talked about a little bit of our time, and I didn't expect to go that long into the army stuff, but whatever. I hope you enjoyed it, dear listener. So when you write, do you actually draw on people you knew when you served, even if you have to file off the serial numbers of their name for legal purposes?
So what I try to do, the short answer is yes. The long answer is I try not to make any one character directly analogous to any one individual I served with. I try to take inspiration from the men and women I served with and do like composite, like this factor about this person or this anecdote fictionalized from my time with this unit, or, and the same thing with my characters and myself. I try never to make a full-on self-insert character, but, my protagonists do have stuff in common with me pretty frequently. But not my entire personality and backstory, right? And likewise for the guys I served with. Mostly, I'm not trying to be sexist or gendered. I just was in artillery when there were not many women at all in the field artillery. It was still almost entirely male. So yeah, I take inspiration from. I try not to just cookie cutter. This person is this person.
Me too, dear listener. But if you like the parts of the character, that's the part that is definitely me, and the stuff you didn't like was definitely not me. Just so we're clear as mud.
If the officer on the page is doing something snotty and entitled, it's something Lieutenant/Captain Watson never would have done. No possibility.
I don't know, like I served with some craptastic officers that I wouldn't piss on if they were burning. But I also served with some of them that were like I said, you would have followed them to hell just because they were that kind of people. Although the one that I'm thinking of, I can't pronounce his name because it was just a slew of letters. He was Polish. We just called him Lieutenant P because nobody could pronounce. He's a West Point guy, so that's probably what they called him. Can you imagine like going through plebe year with a name like that? Like I imagine the mockery was relentless.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you were an upperclassman in charge of people, that would be like you stand in front of them. No, say my name. Say my name, damn it.
Yeah.
Just because.
What kind of racist shit are you trying to peddle here? You can't say a Polish name. That's bullshit, new cadet.
But yeah, it was definitely interesting. But it was one of the things I've talked about with Kristen Note. He's a friend of the show and a friend of mine. Although we've never met in person yet.
Chris is a great guy.
He's a good guy for a Zoomie. But that was one of the things he's read some of my stuff because like we have beta read for each other, and that was what he was like. JR, I need you to try to write some officers that aren't soup sandwiches. Can you try to write just one decent officer? I've been working on like mixing it up a little bit. Like some of them are good, some of them are bad, just like everyone else, right?
Just like everyone else, we're a mixed bag. I think it's the same is true even of West Pointers, because I don't think West Pointers are particularly better or worse than other officers. And I know that the Ring Knockers Protection Association is going to come lynch me for that. But I don't think we're particularly better or worse. I think we're visible. I think that's what happens is you get people with good opinions of West Pointers, they get a good West Pointer, they assume West Pointers are good. If your best lieutenant was from, the University of Tennessee, does it affect your opinion of the University of Tennessee? Like if your worst lieutenant was from Michigan, do you all of a sudden have a firm opinion about Michigan? Like, it's just another college. If you had a shit lieutenant from West Point, it's the goddamn West Pointers, right? It's just because we're a big identifiable block. I tend to think we break pretty much on the standard distribution of officers. Maybe a little bit towards either end of quite good or quite shitty, but there's still a distribution.
Yeah, it's one of those things though. A lot of times you only deal with the officers in the official capacity. So it's when they're giving you bad news or you're suffering the consequences of your poor life decisions. So sometimes it's easy to blame them and not realize that they're just messengers. But I always think back to that old joke. What's the difference between a second lieutenant and a PFC? PFC been promoted twice. Right.
So I had my favorite one of being blamed for a soldier's poor life choices was when the mother called to chew me out when I was a battle. This boy's mother. Now, this boy, I'm sorry, dear listener, we're going to do some more Army story time. This boy, who shall not be named, had failed a urinalysis test so hard that when I went to go collect it from the lab tech was like, sir, there are 3 possibilities. This boy did an immense amount of cocaine a few minutes before he peed in this cup. You have Keith Richards in your battery. Or there's a corpse waiting for you in the barracks. Like that's the possibility. So this was not a kid got a little rowdy on a Friday night and got in trouble. Like, no, this was a repeat offender. He peed hot multiple times. He was a disciplinary issue the whole time, right? And he'd never even been this guy hadn't even been to combat yet. So he's not PTSD suffering. He's just a shitbird. So we kicked him out, right? And during the process of kicking out, his mother gets a hold of my office phone number and like being good stewards of America's sons and daughters, I answer the phone, and she's like, you ruined my little boy. He was such a sweet angel before he came to the Army, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, ma'am, you had him for 18 years. I've had him for 6 months. Like, I don't know what to tell you. He came to me this way. I didn't break him. I definitely get that. Like
the funny thing is is I've also met first sergeants I wouldn't want to play poker with. So my second deployment was with an IRR composite unit, meaning everybody had been out, they'd done their time, they got called back, in that IRR window. So we all go to Fort Leonard Wood, where we in process in, and we get assigned our units that we're going to be sent to the war in. And the guy standing next to me, we called him Jolly Rancher. That was not his name. That was just his nickname because he was fiending. He was always eating the Jolly Ranchers because he was coming off of meth addiction. And so the first thing they do is when we get there, you got to take a piss test to make sure, you're, because theoretically the UCMJ still applies to you when you're under the IRR time. Yeah. Nobody does, because unless they need bodies, they don't really care about you. They've written you off already. And so we go through, we all, pee in the cup, do our little thing. We're standing in formation. They bring the test back. And the first sergeant with an absolute straight face says, Uncle Sam appreciates that your sobriety, the fact that you maintained Army standards while you were away. As this guy's tweaking on his meth addiction, standing right next to me. In fact, he was ironically assigned to my gunner for my first mission into Iraq as he's tweaking on his, detoxing in the 140-degree heat in Iraq. He was detoxing in the turret. We got rid of him at the first opportunity. He was a heat casualty, and so he needed medevac. Yeah. That was the story anyway.
So my first sergeant, when I was a battery commander, equivalent to infantry company, if anybody needs that explanation. When I was a battery commander, my first sergeant was there before me and was in the process of breaking this coke ring. There was a few soldiers in the battery, and I show up and he's briefing me on like, hey, here's who we are in the middle of processing, and here's a couple guys we kind of think are probably involved too. And I was like, a coke ring? And he's like, well, sir, at least our boys go hard.
I like that.
I was like, hey, you got a point,
Tom. Go home, right?
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So we've talked about how our time in the military affects the way you tell the stories. Does it affect the way you engage with content as a consumer? So post-Army time, does it affect the way you read a novel or watch a movie, play a game?
So yes, absolutely. I will say, as with many things, there's a military uncanny valley. If something's so uncanny valley, I think pretty pop culture term that most people understand, but to summarize, the uncanny valley is when something's close enough that it's trying to approach realism, but not close enough that it feels real and right. So if there are things over on the other side of the uncanny valley and the military aspects are just kind of bullshit, it doesn't really bother me. Star Wars, none of the tactics, and unlike Galaxy's Edge, none of the tactics in Star Wars make any sense. Hardly ever. Even in Rogue One, yes, they tried harder, but even then, the gunfights in Rogue One are still kind of cheesy, right? It's a great movie, but but again, you're over there on the other side of the uncanny valley. It's fine. I can still enjoy the movie. It's when a movie tries to take itself super seriously as a serious military drama, and then they jack up the military aspect so hard. I'll go ahead and throw one under the bus. I don't like The Hurt Locker. I get that it's a good drama, but it's trying to treat itself so seriously, and there's so much bullshit in that movie that I'm just like, no, sorry. You're in that military uncanny valley for me. You tried for authenticity and you fell too short, and it's not just a couple nitpick things. It's that's kind of how I see it. Is like, hey, if you're not attempting authenticity, fine. If you're attempting authenticity and you make a few mistakes, also fine. But if you land in the middle between those two extremes, I have a real hard time enjoying it.
I can see that. If you want to know a good Army movie that gets all the details right, watch Stripes.
Yep.
I'm down for Winnebago, by the way.
Stripes, or frankly, you could watch In the Army Now, and there's a surprising amount of truth to that.
Yeah. There were some good ones. Black Hawk Down, as far as desert and urban warfare, did a really good job on the movie.
I got to talk to Master Sergeant Eversman because my roommate was prior service, and Master Sergeant Eversman, I think, had been his RI. And Master Sergeant Eversman said, the movie's okay. I don't look anything like Josh Hartnett, though. His attitude.
So, all right. So it does affect the way you engage with content. Okay, that makes sense. I judge on the gun movies, somehow the car, if you shoot it, it blows up, but also if you hide behind the door, it'll stop a bullet. Like that.
Yeah, don't like that. Don't like that.
I'm not understanding the difference between cover and concealment bugs me when I watch a movie.
I also don't like, pardon me. I also don't like when characters like go rogue and there just aren't consequences, because it's like, no, like no, you're not like, I get that there are people in history who have been, extremely bold, and done things that would get us normal mortals crucified, but like, it's not that common. Like usually if you go color too far out the lines, you're going to get your ass in a crack. So I don't like that. Like Matt Damon's Green Zone, I made the mistake of watching that one, and I was just like,
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, don't bother. It's like, who the hell even wrote this? It's rough.
I mean, I've seen some shenanigans. I watched a guy when the Sergeant Major's USO tour came in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we waited in line because, like all of us newly promoted sergeants wanted to, do the parade rest picture with Sergeant Major of the Army.
Yeah.
And the guy in front of us, like I watched him like chew the Sergeant Major out. I didn't enlist in the reserves for this. It's supposed to be money. And he's just like, you need to send me home. I didn't volunteer. And he's just chewing out the Sergeant Major of the Army, which, that stuff happens. But what also happens is the nice little MPs with their shiny little badges and their silver bracelets come and take him away. And
yeah, no question that it happens. The question is like people.
What happens after?
Yeah, what happens after? What are the consequences for that?
Yeah. And the Sergeant Major looked at me and he goes, "Hey, Sergeant Handley, you want to know what's going to happen next?" And I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "We're going to send him to the brig and make him fill sandbags. And then when his time is up, he's going to still do a year in Iraq." So he spent a year in a brig for like mouthing off to the Sergeant Major of the Army, and then another year in Iraq. And the time in country when he's in the brig, no combat pay, no deployment pay, base pay, and all of the whatever they take out when you're an inmate at a brig. I wasn't one, people. I might have messed up, but not that badly. But yeah, it was like, so, and then we're going to send him to another unit, and his year starts again. I'm like, ooh. I hope this was his first week at least, instead of halfway through the tour.
Nice. In terms of good military content, I'd say, Band of Brothers, obviously, is probably my favorite.
They have the best scene about explaining the chain of command where the officer character is like, you complain up, you don't complain down. So like, so the major asked me what I think of this mission, and he like BS's his way through like, this is the best thing ever, and I'm happy to die. And then of course the guy's down.
Yeah.
I'm like, that was like a perfect scene.
Yeah, that was an excellent scene. That was actually Saving Private Ryan, which is kind of related to Band of Brothers.
Okay, you're right.
No, I get it. They're inextricably linked, right? But yeah, I like both those. My only problem with Saving Private Ryan is the premise does fall apart for me, because for all that I've talked about the humor of the situation, I do believe it's important to remember that, NCOs and officers order people to do very dangerous shit that could get them killed. And it's only fair if you're trying to do it somewhat impartially. So the idea that we're going to all of a sudden take into account familial suffering back in the States and weigh men's lives differently based on that troubles me as an officer. Like, it's like,
there are incidences where entire families, like with the brothers that were the O'Sullivan brothers on the ship that sung.
JR, to your point, yes, absolutely. The Sullivans, like, absolutely, there are reasons to pull people out. But the fact is, you send the order through normal channels and you pull him out when it's safe to do so. You absolutely pull him out of combat. I don't question that. I question sending a highly trained squad of elite infantry under another highly trained captain who really should probably be commanding a battalion, not a company at that point of the war, because you're short on officers and long on command billets. You're not sending a ranger trained captain and 8 rangers on this mission when they could be doing something else that will end the war more quickly and save more lives. So
shouldn't the Rangers not have landed on Omaha? Shouldn't they have landed on Point du Hoc?
Point du Hoc is near Omaha Beach, but yes, like it should have been actual.
The Point du Hoc was the straight climb. I've seen the recreation. Like that would have been a straight climb up. He shouldn't have been going to the beaches where we saw, with the Bangalores and all. It's a cool scene, but I don't think.
So Saving Private Ryan is one of those weird ones where they get enough right that I still have a lot of love and respect for that movie. But then there's other stuff in there that's like, wait, what? Like, at one point, Captain Miller, Tom Hanks is like calling, get me the Naval Task Force Commander. Fuck you, Captain 03. You're not talking to a Navy admiral. Shut up. No, you're not.
Situations where if you're in the right opportunity, stuff could happen, but they didn't set that.
No, that is not happening. Not on D-Day. There's the call for fire is going up a chain, and that guy's not talking.
And this is before we had the radios to allow that person. Like sometimes a forward observer could potentially, but even then, you're not talking to the admiral. You're talking to his gunnery officer. Or whoever.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to B-1 pilots, as an Army captain, but I didn't talk to the commander of U.S. Air Force CENT in a tactical situation.
Well, you just weren't cool as Tom Hanks.
I am not as cool as Tom Hanks in that movie. I have no idea if Tom Hanks is actually that cool as an individual.
No clue. All right, so now we got to do the religion questions because we are like 45 minutes in, and we still haven't talked about your book, and that's not a good thing. So first, Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Oh, I was looking forward to this question because I have listened to your podcast before, so I've heard a lot of different folks answer this one. I am a Firefly. I have respect for, but it is one season of television, right? It's one season of television when Joss Whedon was at the full height of his powers before we found out he was kind of maybe a terrible person. So I like Firefly, but Star Wars and Star Trek, I have about equal loyalty to, with the understanding that I'm very, very specific in my orthodoxy with each. So I'm an original trilogy and expanded universe guy for Star Wars, right? So the first three movies, even with the teddy bear VC stand-in to, the Viet Cong teddy bears fighting the Empire, I still love Return of the Jedi. And I am a huge fan of Tim Zahn and Michael Stackpole and Aaron Alston and Kevin J. Anderson. So I love all their Star Wars novels. Dug into those hardcore in the 90s when I was a kid. Still love them. Reread them occasionally. My kids love them. Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Commander. Or even my oldest daughter, that's her favorite books. I did tell you, my wife and my older girls are home, so you can hear the pupper barking.
All right, sorry about that little jump cut there, dear listener, dear viewer at home. His dog decided to welcome his family home from, climbing Mons Olympus or something cool. I don't know.
Actually, they were recording a choral album. My wife and my two older daughters are actually pretty serious choral singers.
Like they sing to the coral reefs?
Like they sing in a choir.
Oh, choir. I'm hard of hearing. The tendonitis gets me sometimes.
Well, no, it's choral is also, it's pronounced the same way, whether it's semi-organic.
And I live on the beach, so
yeah. I can see why you would think that. Yeah,
I'm a Navy brat who grew up on the coast, so that's one of the things I didn't realize I missed when I was in Iraq, and I'm like I couldn't figure it out. Then we did a couple runs to pick up convoys of the Navy types. At the Kuwaiti Naval Base, and I'm like, oh, it's the salt in the air that I've been missing that I couldn't quite place. The funny thing is because the logistics of sending, and we keep going back to these Army stories, but I don't know, whatever. The logistics of sending supplies up the chain of command over to the Army and down to us, that's a pain in the butt because it's sensitive items. Someone has to sign for it. So instead, of course, we just some of the Navy attached to it escorts it, and we drop it off, and then they either get them a ride home or they stay with the equipment. But so that way their people can sign for the sensitive items that we were hauling for the CBs. So we were on this mission with them for like almost 2 weeks, getting them to northern Iraq where they were going. And we spent the whole time like, I don't see any water. Do you see any water? We were messing with them. And of course they were loving it. Like when we picked them up at the Navy base, like the chief came with us, which is like so it's E7 for started first class, right? And they used like 3 seamen are duking it out. They're having a wrestling match on the walkway to decide who gets to come with us. Because when they come with the Army, they get our combat patch, which they wouldn't get for the Navy. They get a couple awards that they wouldn't otherwise get because they're boots on the ground. So like this was aside from promotion, like this was like bragging rights. Like they didn't quite realize that they're also going into danger where war happens and bullets happen and stuff. Like for them, it's just cool patches, right?
Yeah. And it's a lot of, amongst I'm sure amongst their enlisted rates, it was, a lot, like you said, a lot of bragging rights of, oh no, I actually did go into Iraq. Yeah.
Right. And so there's 4 of them fighting, and I'm looking at this chief. I'm like, you could have brought all 4. Like, you don't have to just bring 3 of them. And he goes, I know that. You know that. They don't know that. We're having fun. And I'm like, well, if you do that, you should at least give me some popcorn. I mean, I've got no problem with shenanigans, but come on, like, prepare a guy. All right. So you had to go deal with the family issue. So we had to stop the recording because I learned the hard way that if I want to be able to do shorts of the episode that I can upload as well, it has to be under 2 hours. I learned that with David Weber, whose episode ironically was longer than 2 hours. I know you're shocked.
I'm absolutely shocked that David Weber could talk for more than 2 hours. It just doesn't match my experience with the man. He's so shy and retiring.
And this was just the 2 hours we recorded. The 2.5 hours were recorded because there was the hour pre-show and the 2.5 hours post-show. I felt like it was a hustle situation. I'm like, blink twice if you need help. But no, it was fun. Like, it was fun. I had a lot of fun talking to him. I'm making jokes, people. So anyway, so we were talking when you had to run that the
Star Wars and Star Trek
question with the Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly, you had answered, your issues with Firefly, and then you were talking about why you liked both the Star Wars and the Star Trek. So,
but only within certain, like, I'm an old grump within certain confines. So original trilogy, expanded universe novels, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. I will say that it's hard not to notice that George Lucas is kind of at his best when he has constraints. Like in the original trilogy, like he had, apparently his ex-wife had a lot to do with how Star Wars A New Hope was cut. And then you have Irving Kershner directing The Empire Strikes Back, having huge input. And also there's a brilliant writer, a woman named Lee Brackett, who is responsible for at least some of the screenplay of Empire Strikes Back. Now, people say there are some sources who claim her influence was really kind of negated by later edits. But when you look at if you look at the structure of Empire Strikes Back, and then look at some of the classic westerns that Lee Brackett also wrote, like El Dorado, but my favorite John Wayne movie, a lot of that structure is still there. Of the hero having to come get hostages from an enemy who wants something from them. The banter between Han and Leia, it's all very similar. So I think she had a bigger impact than is publicly acknowledged. She's in the credits still as a screenwriter. But I think maybe she had more influence than some folks might indicate.
Well, even if they edited out everything she contributed, and I'm not saying that's true because I don't know, but just being part of the ingredients that led to the final product, even if her ideas get canceled, she still meaningfully impacted his thought process, because who knows where he would have gone if he wasn't pushing back against her. Sometimes the foil is as important as the main.
That's an excellent point. I feel like there was no foil on the prequels, which I don't love, and I'm the less I just don't have much good to say about the sequel trilogy. If you're a person who enjoys them, that's fine. I'm not making a moral judgment about your taste, but they're not for me. So Star Wars is great. Again, if I'm allowed to memory hole the things that just aren't for me. Star Trek is very similar. I grew up, my dad was a fan of the original campy 60s series, so I got to see that before my critical thinking skills were fully developed. So I can look past the cheese and the 60s special effects, so-called. So to look at both the fun of the show and some of the philosophy of it that was pretty fun. But I think with Star Trek, you've got another situation wherein the creator has this brilliant vision. George Lucas has Star Wars, Gene Roddenberry has Star Trek, but they work best when there's a foil or there's people working to restrain their worst impulses. I feel like Star Trek: The Next Generation's early seasons were when Gene Roddenberry had the most creative control, and they're the worst Star Trek from the 80s and 90s, from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, because Gene Roddenberry had an order out that there was no interpersonal conflict. So it's like, there's literally no drama on your space drama. Okay. And you had Picard saying lines like, Starfleet is not a military organization. It's like, well, you have ranks and a ship with a F ton of weapons on it, even though you do look like your interior decorator made it look like the Love Boat. It still seems like a warship. So you compare that with what came later in Deep Space Nine, or what preceded it in the original series. Star Trek, the original series, there's an episode where Captain Kirk is on the radio or the communicator to Scotty, and he says, Scotty, execute General Order 27 if you don't hear from me in 2 hours. General Order 27 is a planetary bombardment. So to put this in perspective, you and I both know, and a lot of our readers who are familiar with military things, be it military sci-fi or history, a general order is something that happens commonly enough that you codify it, right? There's a general order for it. OG Starfleet codified planetary bombardment. It's like, this organization that doesn't even want to call itself a military in Picard's day, back in Kirk's day, not only did they sometimes do planetary bombardment, they had a general order for it. So it's like that tonal incongruity always led me to believe Star Trek was at its best in the hands of not its original creator, but the most talented writers who migrated towards it.
That's the one of the ones that's along the same lines as if you've seen the movie Broken Arrow, where they said, I don't know what's scarier, that we lost a nuclear weapon or that it happens often enough we've got a name for it.
Exactly.
It's one of those situations.
Yeah. But really, my real answer, so I like Star Trek and Star Wars, again, as long as I'm allowed to be selective. I mean, Wrath of Khan is just a fantastic movie, even if it wasn't related to an IP I really liked. But the real answer is Babylon 5. And how good is Babylon 5? Babylon 5 is so good that the objectively best Star Trek series is a ripoff of Babylon 5. Star Trek Deep Space Nine is the best Star Trek series, and it's a almost note for note knockoff of Babylon 5 in many ways.
There is some litigation revolving that.
Mm-hmm. I'm not making a legal claim. I'm saying that there are so many dramatic similarities that it's like I have no idea what happened behind the scenes. But if you look at it, you have a space station near dealing with multiple alien species, one of whom was recently occupying the other, and that you have great, massive powers embroiled into a long arc storytelling epic war story. There's just too much in common. Again, I'm not making any legal claim. I'm not saying anyone can sue anyone else, but good Lord, it's real close.
Okay. My problem with Roddenberry's version of Star Trek was it was too utopian, the whole no money. And I'm like, I mean, come on, like people are not they're motivated by self-interest and the idea that they're going to do it just because it's the good thing, but they're going to go risk their lives because it's a great idea without pay.
I agree with you, JR. I think in a society that's truly post-scarcity and people don't have to work for anything, we don't end up becoming Starfleet officers. Most of us end up like the people from WALL-E, if you've ever seen that one.
Yes.
I don't think maybe some exceptional individuals really would become Captain Kirk or Captain Picard, but I don't think that's the normal use case scenario. That's one of the reasons I love Babylon 5. They still have an economy. People still have to work for a living. It's actually one of the things I loved about Deep Space Nine is Deep Space Nine started to push back at that a little in some ways. Like at one point, one of the humans needs money. So he goes to his friend who is a Ferengi and is like, hey, I need some of your money. And the Ferengi's like, well, what if your society doesn't need money, you certainly don't need my money. What are you doing? You didn't earn this. So I really appreciated that. And another thing, like the idea, I've always, since I've become an adult, I accepted it. I accepted the United Federation of Planets uncritically when I was a kid. But since I've gotten older and I've lived a lot of interesting places, met a lot of interesting people, and some of those encounters have been talking and some of those encounters have been fighting. I have a real hard time believing in a one world government anymore, ever. And people will be like, oh, well, it's in the future with all these things. No, I'm sorry. I don't buy it. If you show me one world government, I would bet dollars to donuts I could show you the mass graves necessary to achieve that world government. I don't believe in the utopian vision of one overarching government that everybody's happy with and willingly obeys.
Yeah, I mean, I could see like a confederation of smaller nations, like essentially the United Nations, but even that's got problems, and anybody that pays attention to modern politics is the blooms off that rose.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things. Again, touting. I don't know if you've watched Babylon 5, so forgive me.
I've seen several of the episodes.
Yeah, you gotta like it's a high initial investment because the graphics are dated and the acting ranges from absolutely brilliant to kind of cheese. But the fact is, like, the Earth Alliance is an alliance, and you have fault lines and you have cracks within it. You have acknowledgement that war on Earth is not necessarily a thing of the past. They just have a unified front against other alien species, but it's not, everybody holding hands and singing Kumbaya.
Yeah. All right. So since we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, or The Chronicles of Narnia?
That one's easy for me. Narnia all day long. So Game of Thrones, I read the first couple books when I was in college, and I respected Martin's skill as a writer. And when he, spoilers for Game of Thrones, book 1, season 1, if you're only watch the show, when he killed Ned Stark, I was like, okay, all right, you got my attention. I get it. That was something you don't see in fantasy very much. But then he just kind of kept doing it. It kind of lost the shock value for me. Yes, it's real life is full of chance and anarchy. So yes, it's true to life for characters to die randomly, but the genre is called fantasy. So I kind of fell out of love with Game of Thrones even before the show was on the air, and there's all that drama. I respect Wheel of Time, but I saw a review of it once that kind of summarizes my problems with it, which is for the first 4 books, nothing happens. Everything is filled with portent. I feel like I can respect a slow burn, but I feel like it is just too, like, he is too indulgent with his page count. And that pains me because I anytime you have a veteran author, and Robert Jordan was a Vietnam veteran, decorated for valor, helicopter pilot, if I remember correctly, I want to support them. And I mean, he's gone now, but like, I do want to just unequivocally celebrate his success. But I just couldn't, Wheel of Time never became like my full jam. But Narnia, I mean, it's not as complex as Wheel of Time or Game of Thrones, but man, is it timeless. Like, you can get into Narnia basically at any point, grasp what's going on, but still see that there's so much artistry and care in it. I am religious, so the Christianity of it does matter to me and does win at some point. So yeah, for me, that's Narnia in a walk, man. I even think it has some the first movie Disney did was pretty good too. The ones after that kind of got questionable. And I even, because my wife used to watch them as a kid, I even have affection for the super cheesy BBC adaptations of Chronicles of Narnia that have, like, Aslan is an FAO Schwartz stuffed lion in the live action adaptation of that. It's really quite cute. It's like a stage play, but put on by a community theater, but videotaped. It's really wonderful.
Now, did C.S. Lewis he's one of the Inklings, so he wrote contemporary to Tolkien. Was he also a World War I veteran?
He was. He was an infantryman in World War I.
Interesting. I know that's one of the things I've wanted to dig into. I've got to track down some books. Some of our listeners have sent me some good recommendations. Some of the biographies about Tolkien's time on the Somme. I definitely want to dig into that.
Yeah, Tolkien and Lewis were both extremely interesting, extremely accomplished men. It's actually the first place I found out that C.S. Lewis, Jack Lewis, had served in World War I as an infantryman is, I think it's in Mere Christianity. He talks about how since he was a bachelor for his life, he didn't give a ton of advice on marriage in a lot of his nonfiction, his theological nonfiction. And his reasoning was, he says in the essay, he says, while I'm I will talk about Christian principles of marriage. I don't talk about it too much because I know when I was an infantryman in World War I rather disliked folks from the rear echelons opining on combat. Likewise, since I've never been married, I've never cared for a wife, I've never been in that kind of relationship, I hesitate to opine too confidently about something I've never experienced. So that's the first place I read that he'd been an infantryman in the Great War.
Interesting. I'll have to add that to the list of people I want to read some biographies on.
His stuff is short too. Like his nonfiction is all very short too. Very quick reads. I mean, a little dense because they're philosophy and theology, but you can do them in a week.
Okay. All right. And one of the crying shames of growing up is we stop asking each other the important questions. So we are bringing that back for this glorious radio hours since we ran long. But what is your favorite dinosaur, sir?
I have a fondness for the Stegosaurus. It's always a good choice. And then the Diplodocus, which is like a Brontosaurus, only bigger. It's one of the long neck ones. So those are kind of my favorites. I also have a big affinity. I was a big Transformers kid, G1 Transformers. So all of the original Dinobots, those dinosaurs. So Triceratops, Brontosaurus, T-Rex, Pterodactyl, and Stegosaurus I have affection for all those.
Okay. Did you see the announcement for the new Jurassic Park movie?
Oh, is there another one coming out?
So this one isn't hey, this bad idea hasn't worked a dozen times. Let's try it a dozen and one. This one is the premise is that when they were developing the tech for this, there was this one facility where they tested everything and then they just walked away from it. And now they got to kind of go get it under control because it's run amok.
Wasn't that the premise of the third one too?
Yeah, but that was the park that went run amok. This is the research facility that fed the what they used to build the park is the premise.
I don't know, man. They just haven't really captured it as well since the first one.
I mean, they're repeating the same formula as the awe of the first time you see the dragons, and they do dinosaurs. They do hold up.
Mm-hmm. The imagery holds up. I just I feel like they're going back to the well and they're coming up with less water each time.
Yeah, but I'm a sucker for dinosaurs, so I'm still going to be there.
Fair enough. And dinosaurs are awesome. I wanted to be. I had the paleontologist phase as a kid, where I definitely had dinosaur posters all over my room and wanted to go dig up fossils. My grandparents lived in Utah, and I remember going to a lot of history museums, natural history museums, and looking at all the because Utah has a lot of great fossil deposits, and walking around with them, looking at fully preserved Utah raptor fossils and stuff like that.
The weird thing is that new research is suggesting they might have all been feathered, the dinosaurs, but the T-Rex wouldn't look as scary as just giant murder chicken. So I don't know. Now, the workaround for the Jurassic Park is they were hybrids because they were cloning, partial DNA and mixing it with other things. So they're not true dinosaurs in that they're not bringing back the deceased. They're recreating facsimiles of it.
Yeah, they're dinosaurs with some dinosaur DNA, some reptile DNA, and African gender swapping frog DNA. Yeah,
right. And so, I'm willing to cut a lot of slack. Just like with the dire wolves, they didn't technically bring the dire wolves back.
They made a mishmash of wolf and dire wolf DNA. Yeah, I mean, it's still a hell of an achievement.
Yeah, I'm not taking that away. I just try to be realistic about it. But yeah, so when they do it, I'm gonna watch it. And then they have the iconic line, "You spent so long asking yourself whether you could, you forgot to ask whether you should." That Michael Crichton's. I don't know if when Malcolm said that in the movie, if that was added for the movie or if it was in the book. I don't remember.
I've never read the book.
The books are good. I've read them.
Yeah. Okay. I should give this a try.
Absolutely, they're worth your time.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, so we've talked to dinosaurs. We've got one last and most important question for you. Are you ready for this, sir?
Lay it on me.
All right. We are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. We are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. So, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
So, coffee black just about every day, every morning.
As one does.
Yeah. Tea if I need a little more caffeine in the afternoon. There's this Paris tea my wife gets from Haney and Sons that's really, really nice, and a little less likely to give me the the antsy feeling. When you